Welcome back. Let's take a look at variables. Now for this one, I'm not going to be using my terminal, not just yet anyways. I might open that up in a little bit. And I'm going to create a new file here called variables.py. So what a variable is it's really just a little piece of memory allocated in your computer to a named association, which again sounds like a very complicated thing, but it really isn't. So it looks something like this. We could say name, or maybe let's not do name. Let's do course is equal to Python 101. And this is a variable. So let's take a look at some of the syntax and some of the how it actually works behind the scenes. So behind the scenes, this is our name, and this is going to allocate some sort of memory on our computer. Automatically does that for us. Then we say is equal to, just one equal sign, and then with quotations around it, we say Python space 101. And this is called a string. We'll talk more about strings and numbers and floats and all sorts of data types down the road. You don't need to know that right now. Now, you don't need a semicolon. If you come from a PHP or a JavaScript background, often we use semicolons. Python doesn't care. Python doesn't need semicolons. Python works on new lines, and it works on indentation. So what we could do is we could say print hello world, and you see how this is in quotations, and this is in quotations. Well, we can basically swap that out. We can say, instead of hello world, we could say print course. And what this is going to do is say, find a variable called course, if it exists, and then find what that value is. And so in your computer, somewhere, it's being stored as Python 101. So when we print this, it's actually going to say Python 101. And that's a variable. And that's really all there is to variables. Now there's different variable types, different data types. We'll talk about each one down the road individually. But for now, you just need to know that a sentence has quotations around it. So if you have a space in there, or if you have any letters from A to Z, or any European or Russian or Asian characters, really any sort of character that's not a number or a decimal, you put quotations around it. And so let's go ahead and give this a shot. Let's save this and view our terminal. And what I can do here is, because I have variables in this folder, I can also do ls-la, or if you're in Windows, you can type dir, or if you're in Windows, you can type dir. So ls-la shows me variables.py, and I could type Python var, hit tab for autocomplete variables.py, and it says Python 101. Now, if this was a different course, if this was, let's say, a JavaScript course, we could simply change that here, and it will change it here for us as well. So we could go ahead and rerun this, and it says JavaScript 101. Now, that's the nice thing about variables, is we can use them as many times as we want. So we don't have to just declare it once. In fact, if you declare it once, it's probably not that useful. Actually, no, I explained that wrong. Declaring it once is useful. You only need to declare it once. Accessing it more than once makes it useful. So we could print this a number of times, and I just printed that over and over and over again. Hit save, and let's rerun Python variables.py, and it says JavaScript 101 over and over and over again down here. And that's all there is to a variable. Now, what I would like you to do, as you know, just a little bit of side practice, is I just want you to create a variable and print it. So create a variable, call it something like Python 101, or create a new variable, call it name yourself, and then print out your name. That's all I want you to do. Nice and simple, should take you 30 seconds to a minute. When you're done that, let's head on over to that next lesson where we look at a little bit of formatting in Python, because I mentioned that Python doesn't care about semicolons. It doesn't really care about curly braces and things like that, and it works on indentation. So let's take a look at that in the next lesson. Python is a unique language because it doesn't care about things like curly braces. So in JavaScript, you have something that looks like this, a function, thing, parentheses, and then curly braces. And then we can have some sort of indenting in here, or we don't have to have any indenting, and we can just write this. That works too. But we're not writing JavaScript, we are writing Python. And in Python, we use indentation. So a thing like a variable, like course, is equal to Python 101. And then to create another variable, we just put it on another line. We don't have to worry about a semicolon or declaring multiple variables at once like we do in JavaScript or any other language. We simply do name is equal to Caleb Tallien. And if you wanted to, you could always follow me at Caleb Tallien on Twitter. Let's do that, in fact. Let's do Twitter at Caleb Tallien. And then for another variable, we simply do, the variable name is equal to, and then some stuff in here. Now, when it comes to things like functions, which we'll talk about near the end of this course, or when we talk about things like conditional statements, which is in the middle of this course, we're going to see things like if something is equal to something else, colon, and then we have our code in here. And what's nice about this is we don't need all those curly braces. We don't have to get lost in where all the curly braces are. We simply use a colon. And that tells Python that the next line is supposed to be indented. Now you can indent any way you want as long as it's consistent. So if you have 1 space, that's fine. 2 spaces, 3 spaces, 4 spaces, 68 spaces, you could do anything you like. But typically we stick with tabs or 4 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see those tiny little dots in there. That's 4 spaces. I usually just hit tab and that works. Now, in other programming languages, if you have any programming experience in another language, typically we can get away with writing nothing in here. And that's fine. We can stub out some code that way. But that's not going to work in Python. In Python, if we have no code inside of here, we simply type pass. But all our code can go in here. And then when we want to get out of this if statement, we simply delete that tab and we go back to the leftmost line here. And then we could say something like if something else is equal to something else, pass. And this should have a pass as well. So we're looking at something like that, and that's indentation. And so when you indent, you're saying, hey, there's a colon at the end here, make sure you indent. And that's going to execute all this code in here. And if there is no code, we simply type pass, and that just means do nothing. Otherwise, watch this. If we do course is equal to Python 101, and let's get rid of this pass, and let's execute this file, we're going to see an indentation error. So we can do Python indentation.py, that's the file that I made up here before I started this video. And it says file indentation.py line 8, syntax error, unexpected, end of file while parsing. And so it expects more to be down here. What we could do is we could simply say, let's touch this up, we could say pass. And when we do this, we don't see any errors. So if you see a syntax error, chances are it's just indentation. Indentation isn't working. Let's go ahead and do one more example here. Let's delete that pass and let's write another if statement, but this one has a pass. And so this time we're not going to see an unexpected end of file while parsing. Let's go ahead and run this. And this time we see an indentation error. And anytime you see an indentation error, it's definitely indentation error based. And it expected an indented block after line 8. So, I guess this is actually before line 8. So it's saying there's an indentation error on line 8 and it is expecting something up here. So we could type PASS for pass. And we don't see any errors. And so the whole reason I'm making this video is because in other programming languages, we tend to use curly braces. And curly braces, when it opens and closes, says everything inside of the curly braces is going to be part of, our if statement or our function or something like that. In Python, we simply use indentation. Now, what happens if we go ahead and indent course and Twitter? Well, this is expecting something else. And so it gets this weird indentation here automatically. And when we run this, we should see an indentation error as well. And we see indentation error, unexpected indent. And again, all your code should stick to the left as far as possible, unless you have a colon. Whenever you have a colon, you hit tab. If you have another if statement in here, if something, do something else. We could say if something else, colon, do another thing. And so every time you have a colon, you just want to indent. And whenever you want this if block or a function, and again, we'll talk about those in the future, but whenever you want those to not work, or to end rather, not to not work, but to end, you simply unindent. And you go back to, well, in this example, we would go back to our leftmost area. In this example, we would come back out where it says if, so we would write more stuff in here. And to get out of this if statement, all this stuff in here, we simply say, do more stuff in here. And then what's nice about VS Code is we can simply collapse this with these little arrows. And VS Code is it's intelligent enough to know that these are if statements that are being, well, they're trying to be executed, but the syntax itself is suggesting that, for example, only this should be collapsed, like that. And all of this should be collapsed, like that. Now, there's no homework or assignment for this particular lesson. This is simply a conceptual lesson. I want you to know that indentation is very important when it comes to Python. Code comments. In every programming language, we have some way to write a code comment. And a code comment in Python, and let's just create a new file here called comments.py, is if we have something like name is equal to Caleb Tallien, that's me, we can have a code comment that starts with a number sign. And this is a code comment. And you can see that it's sort of grayed out because it's not actually going to execute when we try to run this file using Python. And so what we can do here is print name. And if we go down here and type Python comments.py, we're going to see that it prints my name out. Now, the reason comments are important is, well, first of all, they're not going to be executed. Even if we have a tab in here, it's not going to care because it is simply a code comment. It doesn't matter. Code comments are for humans, they're not for the computer. Now, we could have another code comment at the end of a file, or not the end of a file, but the end of a line, and we simply hit space, number sign, another code comment. And we can go and execute this, and this is still not going to say anything about another code comment. So comments are great for sharing thoughts and ideas to come back to. If you're writing some piece of complex code down the line, you might want to comment your code just so that, if you put your code down for a month or 6 months and you come back to it, you're going to know exactly what's going on. Now, typically in Python, we don't comment basic code. So everything you're learning in this course, we tend to not comment. But if you're working with something complex, maybe data science or large data sets, or something a little bit unique for your website, chances are you're going to want to write some comments. And not only is it good for you, but a code comment can be good for other developers. So if you're using a version control system like Git, you're going to want to share your code comments with other people. So when they download your source code, they can just simply read through it and go, oh, this complex piece of code simply says this is a code comment, or a better comment would be, this is the teacher's name. And so when people read your code, or if you download this code, if you read this code and you say, who is this name? Who is Caleb Tallien? You can read this and say, oh, it's the teacher's name. Ah, okay, that's who Caleb Tallien is. And so it makes a little more sense that way. Another great thing you're going to see is to do, T-O-D-O. And you can see mine actually highlight to do a thing in here. So if you're stubbing out some code for a complex feature and maybe you're halfway through and, tomorrow you want to pick it up, tomorrow morning you want to pick it up, and you're like, okay, well, I still need to do this thing. You can leave a little code comment for yourself. To do a thing in here. Now, if your to do doesn't highlight in VS Code, that's because I have an extension called to do tree. And all this does is it shows your to-dos, fix-me's, etc. And so if I go back here, and you can see down here, once I have that extension installed, it gives me my to-dos, Python 101, comments.py, and it brings me straight to that line when I click to do a thing in here. And so you're going to see a lot of to-dos or a lot of fix-me's in production code, or while you're writing some production code with a team. Now, what I want you to do as your task for this lesson, write a code comment, execute that file, and make sure that it doesn't show up in your code. That's super easy, should take you about 30 seconds, maybe a minute. When you're done that, let's head on over to the next lesson, where we talk about Python data types.